Bashar, screw you and screw those who salute you. These protesters have been waiting for their moment since the Arab Spring unfolded earlier that year, knocking over decades-old dictatorships in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. At the time, Assad had told the Wall Street Journal, "This is the Middle East, where every week you have something new." But he had confidently predicted that the maelstrom would not affect his country. Instead, it would spur reform. He would turn out to be spectacularly wrong on both counts. On March 6, 2011, a group of teenage boys, inspired by the wave of protests spreading across the region, had been arrested for spray painting "Ashab yurid iskat in-nizam," the people want the downfall of the regime, on walls in Dara, a rundown farming town near the Jordanian border. It was the rallying cry of the revolutions in Egypt and Libya, and it brought swift retaliation from local security forces. When the boys were released 2 weeks later, alive but brutalized, their angry families marched on the governor's house to demand justice. They were met with a hail of bullets. 3 protesters were killed, and an uprising was born. By now, a pattern had emerged. The funeral of someone murdered by the regime would then turn into a protest against the regime. Security forces would flood in and open fire, and then the next day there would be an even larger funeral. By that November, there were dozens of such funerals across Syria every day. I watched the crowd as they chanted "Hurriya, Hurriya, freedom, freedom," over and over. They waved banners calling for a no-fly zone to prevent Assad from murdering his people. They had seen Western jets save Libyans in Benghazi from Gaddafi's advancing forces months earlier, and they believed that the West would do the same for them. How bitterly disappointed they would be. In that moment, though, I felt giddy with a mixture of excitement and fear. Rallies like these were often targeted by pro-Assad militias, infamous for their thuggish cruelty. Known as shabiha, derived from the Arabic word for ghosts, these men wore street clothes and seemingly appeared out of thin air. People lived in fear of them not just because of the brutal beatings they administered, but because they acted as informants, telling the regime which families were involved with the protest movement. Unlike the military, you never knew if the shabiha were there or not. Under these circumstances, talking to a Western reporter could be a death sentence. And yet, here in Douma, as soon as people saw that I was a journalist, they wanted to tell their story. I marveled at their bravery. One man had stopped me in the street as I walked past with my camera. He spoke some English, and so I stopped to record an interview. "Please," he implored, "this is the real Syria." His voice quivered with emotion. "If you come, you will see real bodies. They are not stones. They are not toys. They are real bodies." A group ushered me over to the small graveyard designated for those who had been killed in the uprising. They were called shuhada, or martyrs, and there were about 60 of them buried in neat rows. A photograph of a young boy smiled out from one of the headstones. I thought of the man's words, "They are not toys." Each shaheed, singular for martyr, left behind the grieving. The day before the funeral, I had been introduced to a tailor who sat on a stool and wept quietly, his eyes fixed on the ground, as he told me about his son's death. He spoke so softly that I strained to hear the details. His son had attended a protest at his university. Security forces arrived. Bullets were fired. His son... He stopped speaking, and his body shook softly with sobs. I watched his hands fidgeting constantly with fear and grief. I wanted to take them in mine and hold them, to put down the camera for a minute and be a human being. But I knew the only way I could help him was to make sure that people heard his story. I prompted him to keep going. وبعدين? And then? His son was shot in the stomach on the university steps, he went on. The hospital didn't want to treat him because they feared punishment from government forces. He bled to death. The man's voice cracked. It was excruciating,